Thank you, Jesse. Sorry, I was trying to reach out to you because we have some questions from the audience. So I wanted to save some time for the audience to reach out to us. Thank you for that. And I agree and I understand politics and governance are the harder aspect. And I agree that tech is the easier part actually for climate change. But thank you so much to all the speakers. Before I open up it to the audience, very quickly, I mean, we have had the speakers coming from the Stories of the Future, Mr. Kim, and Science and Tech and Activism, what's happening very near to us from Mr. Sonam, and Jesse came with policy and governance angle to the topic we are dealing with today. And I've had some interesting questions from on the Slido. But just before that, and we'll keep our responses very short so that we have more questions from the floor. Just wanted to get your thoughts when we look at climate change, when we talk about climate change, as Mr. Sonam rightly said about agriculture and energy being one of the beasts of contribution to the climate change, but also one of the most fundamental thing that is required for us to survive. And as type 0 civilizations that we are, we have the most inefficient way of actually producing energy. So my question and thoughts around how do you see these things being fundamentally changed with technology or policies and regulations around the world, especially energy and agriculture, so that the climate change activism is more realistic on the ground? Because without solving the problem of how we actually generate and consume energy, I don't think we are dealing the right thing for climate change to be managed by us as much as we talk about policies and regulations and technology. So wanted to have a quick thought from different angles of stories and different angles of governance and also from technology side. We will keep it short so that I can put in more questions from the audience. Thank you. Maybe Ms. Kim, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It's too big of a problem to rely on activism alone and put the burden back on the individuals who then have to spend their volunteer time when they're not making a living to push for climate change. That's important, but it's the crucial thing is at the level of technology that we call law. So really what Jesse was talking about is more important for our current focus than the technologies that we will shift to. For instance, regenerative agriculture has a tremendous potential to draw down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and therefore cool the planet at the same time that we're growing food. This is one of the great double goods. And it's estimated that the Green Revolution's industrial agriculture based on fossil fuels for tractor movements and for shipping and for pesticides and fertilizers has created such depleted soils that the capacity is there for carbon uptake in the soils that could draw down as much carbon dioxide as we have burned into the atmosphere. Now, that isn't easy, but it can't happen without a government and financial structures to support that kind of shift in our agriculture. And that's true for all of the fleet of equitable tax structures or making people pay the true costs of burning their carbon, but making sure that any kind of costs that people pay are progressive, like progressive taxes. The more richer you are, the more you pay. This should be a principle across the board. Economists like Thomas Piketty in France or the Roosevelt Institute in the United States, it's not very difficult to construct tax structures that protect the most vulnerable and force the richest to pay. And it's easy to explain and it's even popular to people. And yet at the level of political representation amongst legislatures. It does not happen because those legislatures tend to be beholden to precisely the fossil fuel industries. So we're in a political fight there where what people can do is understand the situation. That's education, like Sonam was talking about. And the education has to be that equity is crucial to climate justice, and that we can do it by way of um, our political economy. The ways in which governments set guardrails on how money is spent and where it goes are all within our powers. So I would say it's a movement to change the laws. And so since we're talking at the start of Bhutan's law school, it's important to emphasize that this is the crucial technology in world history right now, is changing the laws themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe any other quick thoughts from Mr. Sonam and Jesse?
Yeah, quickly, you said energy and agriculture, and I mean, it's certainly for agriculture, there's going to be crops that just won't be viable in regions that they've been viable for, for millennia. And so there's going to have to be, part of like building resilience is going to be, developing and supporting communities to implement new cultivars, and then also just having greater livelihood resiliency, other options as well. So there's a whole host of issues we can get in there, and we have a transforming agriculture team at WRI. I guess what the thing that energy that comes to mind is most critically is, now that we're seeing we're seeing so much action on clean energy policymaking and electric vehicles, is as I think we all know, that the minerals and that are going to drive those are largely consolidated in a handful of countries, and so there's the demand for these minerals is likely to get to the point that that there may be some bottlenecks for them, and especially in a way to procure them in a way that does not create significant local harm. So there's equity issues there in terms of the communities that may live near these mining sites, and the methods that are taken to mine those. We're talking about Central Africa, Chile, and then there's countries that have a lot of them, like Russia, where they're unlikely to come from the in the short term. So there's one, and maybe to put into perspective, there was a recent paper that showed how we could dramatically, by like orders of magnitude, reduce the need for some of these minerals by focusing equally as much, if not more, on improving pedestrian. This is specifically for the United States, but a lot of the demand, especially with these new laws, for pedestrian-friendly cities, but buses and bicycle transit, and not solely on electric vehicles. There's certainly regions and places in the world where yes, you're going to need individual vehicles, but we should not be prioritizing them to exclusion of other forms of public transit.
Absolutely, thank you. At this point, maybe if we can have some questions from the audience. Anybody? Of course, I do have some in Slido. Yes, sir.
I'm a little shy about asking this question, given where we are located in Bhutan, a Buddhist country. But for the panel, when does the panel? No, I should back up. What does the panel see as the role, and when, if it ever, for the kind of direct action that's laid out in Ministry for the Future? And Kim will know exactly what I'm talking about, but I think other panelists will as well.
Well, I feel obliged to answer that very good question. Because of the reference to my novel, which includes scenes of what are sometimes called eco-terrorism. One could also say direct resistance. The book does not make a good distinctions between nonviolent resistance and violent resistance, because the book models the real world in which both forms of resistance tend to shade into each other. And I personally would say there's never a time for harming other human beings. I would also say the time might already be past to harm carbon emitting equipment, expensive, foolish cars, oil pipelines. Andreas Malm, who wrote How to Blow Up a Pipeline, is very good on making these distinctions in a way that my novel is not. I think that the more suffering there is around the world by people who see their villages and their families destroyed by climate change, the more incitement to violence against other humans is going to rise. It'd be best to forestall that by taking nonviolent action now. And I was very impressed and want to acknowledge the incredible efforts that Somanam is making in terms of direct action by way of the civil resistance that has a legacy going back through Gandhi to Henry David Thoreau, the American transcendentalist nature lover. And so I am thinking we may already be at a point where everything peaceful should be tried already. And if not, we're going to see things get more violent. So there is, I think, already the time, we should be doing it now, for actions like Sonam's and other direct action to force the issue. And that would include, let's say that young people glue themselves to the doors of asset managers or to the legislatures, or just sit in places where laws are being made to express their opinions. We're going to see more of that, and I think it's very appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Sonam, would you have a comment on the question?
No, I was disconnected and could only connect just now, so I don't know the context, but it's okay.
Sure. Thank you. Maybe we can have another question, and maybe say if you want a response from Mrs. Sonam, we can repeat the question. But happy to have another question from the audience. Right. So maybe let me. There are some questions on the thing. Let me try to put in one or two of them together and see if I can pose that question. What is the value role of the humanities and liberal arts education in the context of emphasis that's given in STEM education generally, worldwide? So basically the question comes from around the values of arts and humanities in the area of education, maybe a little bit targeted towards climate change. How do we educate our next generation to understand climate change? And what's the role of arts and liberal arts and in education, apart from STEM subjects itself? Mrs. Sonam, would you want to have that, since it's related to education and your activism in education in Ladakh has been exemplary?
Okay. Okay, sorry, I didn't know it was me. Well, I'm from engineering, so I wouldn't know so much about these, but I remember during my engineering, the best part of engineering and which was very wisely done in the first year of engineering was that you had a lot of emphasis on humanity, and that is very important for especially these technocrats who, without an understanding of sociology and other such social and human psychology and understanding, could have made a bigger mess. I remember the best thing I learned about economics, with all its greed and growth stories, was the law of diminishing returns, which is something that modern modern growth-oriented industries and people could understand when I fail to convince them with what Buddha said, for example, that for us human beings, a bigger achievement is to conquer a single desire than to fulfill 1,000. And I see how that is the problem, because we believe we'll achieve a lot and be happy if we fulfill all our desires, whereas our greater achievement is in conquering desires rather than chasing after desires. Now this to some looks like touchy-feely, new agey. So I tell them your own modern economics talks of law of diminishing returns, which means that the first object that you acquire gives you full satisfaction. Example of a pair of shoes. The first pair of shoes gives you such satisfaction. The second one doesn't. The third one even less. There is a diminishing return or utility of all these goods. The 41st pair of shoes hardly matters, but it does the same damage to the environment as your first pair, which gave you so much satisfaction. So why to destroy the planet for something that doesn't even change your life? And then I add a little twist of mine and say, but please continue to buy your 42nd pair of shoes, not for yourself, for somebody who doesn't have a first pair. Then your 41st and 42nd and 43rd will continue to have 100% return. You will be the richest, person of satisfaction. All these understandings should come to people. They should be sensitized towards these as a engineer one was. So these thoughts and philosophies definitely should be a part, and they should be oriented towards what is happening in the world today around equity and social justice and other forms of social well-being. So therefore, I would definitely say that it is a path to go, not just technology, but understanding.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Can we have the mic, please?
Thank you. I'm very sorry I missed the first part of this thing. I came here very interested actually to meet you, Mrs. Onomonchu. I'm a great fan of yours and been following your activism, and I want to congratulate you on this. I just want to put in my 4 annas in your support. I've attended a number of Delhi DSDS under Dr. Pachauri in the old days, a function run by Teri, which I'm sure you've attended, Ms. Solmochu. And in that, I've always maintained that in the climate war, if we are to wait for governments to act, we are lost. Because the governments are never going to do anything. They have no political will or resolve to really sincerely tackle climate issues. And if we are to be successful in tackling this climate war, then we must look to civil society. Civil society, globally put together, have a great say in everyday people, the churches, the little organizations, the NGOs, all of that. If they united globally, they can definitely make major contributions to this war against climate change. But if you're going to wait for governments, no good. So I just want to say, continue, Mr. Sonowanchu, continue and spread this word of yours and let other people throughout the world take up the same banner which you carry with success. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But I want to say that governments are reflection of the people. If we are strong, governments will follow what we say. If we are weak, they'll follow financial and other interests and commerce. And in Ladakh's case, they were more obeying to the industrial powers and lobbies. So we said we have to be louder than them, then the government will come towards us because their existence depends on us. So therefore, you're right. The logical mechanism is such that people decide who forms the government. So we better put to use this unless we are living in China.
Thank you, sir. I think we have touched a lot of aspects about science, activism, humanities, climate change. I know it's such a vast topic, and I hope we have been able to do some justice in terms of trying to bring these together to see, I don't want to say a way forward, but at least give us a perspective of going away with a thinking hat on various aspects. Probably one aspect we did miss to talk about is the economy and of climate change. Or the economy itself with the way we progress as a society, which is also an important part, and how does our perspective of climate change, how we act on it, also has an impact on economy and the corporations of the future. I did want to steer the conversation that side, but we are in short of time. We have another 3 minutes, and I would want 45 seconds last summary thoughts from each of the panel speakers to close the session. If I may, let's keep it to about 45 minutes, and if I may request Jesse to start the final thoughts for the session.
I've done mine. I'd like to give my time to others.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Maybe I'll just, I feel like I summarized my thoughts for too long of a time during my presentation. Maybe I'll just quickly say into the arts and humanities. I mean, well, first, obviously, Kim is like an embodiment of like why, literature inspires people to take action. People need narratives, something that inspires their imagination. We know that it's not only climate change, it's not only about like losing livelihoods. It's also about being dislocated from your place and culturally important places to you. That's something that we learned through the humanities, and just we're all getting at like how we change people's behaviors and the values that people put on their modern conveniences versus a planetary scale or a broader sort of sense of collective obligation and choice that we make around the future. So I think the arts humanities has a massive role to play. I think if anything, they've been sort of at times shut out of that conversation or not really listened to. I think that's changing now more. Can you tell that I was a humanities major in college? I hopefully they will continue to play part of the conversation.
Thank you. Ms. Kim, would you like to have a summary thoughts?
Yes, thank you. And I want to follow up on what Jesse and Sonam have been saying. The arts and humanities, I've made my pitch for what the arts can do for us going forward. Speaking of the humanities and following on what Sonam said, it's a question of values, and engineering has values, science has values. What looks to be a straightforward problem solving is usually solving problems that reduce human suffering and create more opportunity for things like Bhutan's gross national happiness. So the Buddha is good on this, but I'm thinking also about European existentialism. Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialists said something very important. We don't know what life means, and the universe doesn't provide an answer. We have to make up what life means. And this is what the humanities are doing in philosophy and the like. And existentialism says we make it up. How do you make it up? By figuring out what will help other people and to have a project of your own. So there was a crisis of meaninglessness in the United States in particular before climate change. Young people being urged to waste their lives going for the 42nd pair of shoes. And there was no point to it. In climate change, everybody, but young people especially, have been given back a meaning to life. We have to get through this century without a mass extinction event. Everything has to change. The meaning is there slapping us in the face. So although it is a crisis, it is also a gift for those poor people who were so prosperous that they didn't know what the meaning of life was anymore. We're all in the same boat. And so I am going to try to wrap up this session with thanks to everybody. It has been inspiring to me, and I'll continue on, and I hope everybody else will, in a spirit of solidarity following these lines of thought. Life has meaning. We have got to save the other creatures of the planet. We've got to repair the biosphere. We've got to have justice on Earth amongst people. And these are projects that will take up all of our time and effort. So in some strange way, maybe we're in a good spot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I would like to thank all the three speakers for the session today, all the members who are here with us, about 60 plus of us here, as well as we have about, I think at the peak time, we had about 25 of us joining online from around the world. We'd like to thank GS School of Law and look forward to continuing the conversation as we move ahead. I hope we have been able to tinker a bit of our thoughts in the area of science, activism, and climate change. Thank you so much.